course, the issue of trust, what it means within the different agencies that our panelists sit at, what it means for our country to actually deliberately build public trust, or for fellow Kenyans to begin to trust our institutions more. VC, I'll start off with you. This summit opens with a claim that we have entered, how does it form, and why is it that when it breaks, it seems to break almost completely?
Thank you so much, Terry-Ann, and thank you for this forum, PS Korir. It's something I was discussing with Madeline just now, and she was saying this is so professor-like, the approach that you're giving it. So when we trust someone, we have an expectation that they will deliver on the promise that they're making to us. So there's always a promise in the middle of this trust issue, and the question, will it be delivered or not? And in some cases, we fully expect it to be delivered. So in other words, we trust. And in other cases, we have a question mark. Will this person actually deliver it? And the reason why we might trust somebody, I think at the base of it, first of all, is can they even deliver it? Do they have the ability? Are they competent enough to deliver on such a promise? Because if I tell you I'll give you 1 billion shillings by tomorrow, can I really pull that off? It's unlikely. So you just say, I know you mean well. I know you're a good friend of mine, but you just can't do it. So I don't trust that you will do it. So the first thing really is competence, that you can do it. Then the second one is, you might call it honesty, that you're the sort of person who says what they think, means what they say. You're not sort of two-faced. You're saying one thing, but you've got another agenda playing. You're the sort of person who's honest. So you'd need to be honest for me to trust you. And then the last dimension, I would say, is benevolence. You mean well. I think that came up just now with the idea of intent, the pure intention. Are you on my side? I know this is what you're saying now, but if things get difficult tomorrow, will you run away? Will you serve your own interests? Will you still serve mine? Can I count on you to be on my side no matter what happens? And that's what then makes me trust. So I'd say it comes down to at least two, most likely all three of those dimensions. You mean you're competent, you can do it, you're honest, and you mean well.
Thank you, Dr. Caroline, I'll come to you now from the context of open governance, or open government. What does open government look like in the moment it's actually working? And the moment when an ordinary person can actually decide, that I can rely on this institution.
Thank you, Terry-Ann, and thank you, PS and the team for setting this up. So I sit at the intersection of two very interesting spaces, and I want to relate the two of them. So first of all is the Open Government Partnership itself, and also Mzalendo Trust, which is a parliamentary monitoring organization. And so core to these two spaces is trust. And core to it, which then speaks to the principles of the Open Government Partnership, is participation. But it's not just participation. Is it meaningful? Are people being heard? Are the voices of the citizens really being listened to, or are we ticking boxes? Secondly, OGP then goes a step further to create a space, co-created space. We, the actors on this side of OGP like to say that it's the one space that brings everybody together to the same table. So from government, and even this meeting this morning is testament to that, whether you have government, private sector, civil society like myself, media, academia, you sit around the table and identify issues that affect the citizens and come up with solutions. But you don't just come up with the solutions. You co-create, you co-implement, you co-monitor, and you co-evaluate. And I think globally, that's what's given the Open Government Partnership the space that it continues to occupy as not just a catalyst of trust, but also a builder. A builder, even where trust has been broken, like we saw here, the Open Government Partnership space continued to provide itself as a safe space where we could sit round tables and actually ask ourselves the hard questions as to what needed to be done to move forward. So in that way, in creating the participatory spaces, in innovating, because we are not just sitting waiting for things to unfold. Every other day we are innovating new ways, new mechanisms, new technology to facilitate this sort of engagement, civic platforms that are helping bridge the gap between citizens and the duty bearers. And so we continue to innovate, we continue to co-create, we continue to participate, and we continue to measure the results against what we are purposing to do. Yeah.
Thanks, Caroline. And we will come back to talk about the role of the civil society, in keeping these promises or in keeping us accountable. Madalena, I'll come to you now. Investing in public service delivery is often cited as one of the most effective ways of building public trust. At a time of global uncertainty, we've seen some of the numbers that PS shared with us earlier. What would you say are effective, accountable, and inclusive public institutions, and why are they more important than ever?
Thank you very much, and thank you, PS. I think this is the second time that we are having this discussion. We first had it earlier in the year where we are really just exploring the importance of the government embarking on this summit to address the critical issue of trust that I think the PS has explained it in detail, but I think the 2 years of the citizens of the youth of Kenya came out and told us why there are trust deficits in the institutions or in the institutions of public service. So all of this is out there. I don't think I need to repeat. And I really like what the CS has outlined. I think basically the CS has outlined everything that I was thinking of sharing. Trust is earned. And the citizens and the public service, there's a social contract between them that these institutions were set up to be able to deliver on each of their respective mandates to the citizens. And citizens cannot just, or the institutions cannot just expect the citizen to sit down and to rest just because the institutions have been established. They want to see the tangible results and dividends of those institutions. And the CS has given very good examples there. When citizens go to the hospitals and see that doctors are available, competent doctors are there, they get services on time. When citizens know that they can apply for their ID from wherever they are, they don't need to be in Nairobi, whatever remote locality they are, they can get it on time. They can get it at at a fee that is the standard fee for everybody. When citizens know that, we had a discussion earlier in the year with SMEs in discussing about the ease of them registering their businesses, that they have to go from different offices to get the required permits that they need to register their businesses. When citizens just know that they can get services from the institutions that have been entrusted to deliver these services to them, trust is automatically built. Yeah? Because then they can see the tangible dividends of those institutions working for them. They can see that those institutions are fair. They can see that those institutions are efficient. They can see that those institutions are meeting their needs or are meeting their demand. On the other hand, this then compel the citizens to meet their end of the agreement or of that social contract in terms of whether they can then pay their taxes, they are willingly paying their taxes, or they are willingly also respecting those institutions or just fulfilling their part of the contract or part of the deal. So really trust is earned. Trust is seen in the results that the institutions that are built are serving the communities. Trust is seen as also the availability of data and access to information, that citizens can freely access information that they need for them to be able to access the services that are there. When information are not easily available for citizens, then there are issues of mistrust, there are issues of not knowing whether indeed what the institutions who have set up to deliver what they are delivering are in fact meeting their demands. The CS has cut on a number of institutions when he was outlining his examples and critical ones. I think institutions of democracy, as the CS has alluded to, when citizens can also see that those institutions are functioning fairly, transparently, and that transitions can happen in an efficient and in a transparent way of governance, then trust automatically in those institutions, or the citizens' level of trust are then built. So it's really by the citizen delivering according to the institutions, rather, delivering according to their mandate, and then this dividend is then seen in the life or in the difference that it makes in the life of common people or the common citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Madalena. PS, I'll come to you now. And from both your opening remarks and PCS's remarks as well, it's quite clear that Kenya is convening this summit as a deliberate act of diplomatic leadership. And as you did mention, Africa has and continues to pay the price of risk. We've all seen the conversations that Africa is trying to bring to the table where it comes to setting up an Africa, credit rating agency. But I'm curious, PS, the estimated loss for Africa is about $75 billion per year as a cost of interest, actually, as a cost of risk. How do you convert, that argument into leverage in the rooms where the rules of the global financial architecture are being made? And is Africa actually on that table?
Well, thank you very much. Just before I answer that question, part of the reason this conversation is so important is because for us, it's really, really practical. So for example, government is trying to support our young people get skilled jobs abroad. As part of that, we struggle with the question of mutual recognition of certificates, for example. Where other countries question whether our nurses, have passed through all the loops, for example, and therefore they make it. Sometimes they want to hire them, but they subject them to a lower standard, for example, and that's very, very painful because they get paid less, compared to what they actually deserved. And so it speaks then to our regulatory system with respect to the training of these individuals. I spoke earlier about trade. I mean, this is a huge, huge issue. Our exports are contingent, especially on the agriculture sector, they're contingent upon quality assurances. Quality assurances by KEFIS, by KEBS and by others. Do the avocados that we sent out there, do they stand muster? Once they begin to be opened, and when they're tested and they're found to be of lower quality, that has a serious knock-on effect, and there's a cost associated to it. So for us, from where we sit, these are real practical challenges, and we must address them. Now to your question. The risk perception of the continent is, it's overblown. It is overblown on account of information asymmetries, the way the framing of Africa in the media of the global West, and just historical baggage, as it were. And Africa is saying that, we must tell our own story. We must share more data. We must engage in the spaces that matter. And I think you've seen the changes, including the admission of an additional director
representing the Global South, particularly Africa in the World Bank. You've seen some changes with respect to the guarantees the World Bank is giving to the continent. You know, all of these things speak to the fact that the agency on the part of Africa's leaders on this question is beginning to resonate, and that their message is getting passed through. And so, yes, I think there are elements of risk and fragmentation that we need to address. There are challenges around standards, but I think some of these challenges are overblown, they're overrepresented, they're overemphasized, and that has a knock-on effect on the price, of capital, so to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PS. Matthias, I'll come to you now, drawing on your, comparative experience across different democratic systems. What separates an institution that holds public trust, across time, across crisis, from one that loses it? Is it structural? Is it leadership? Is it culture?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be part of this eminent panel here. I would try and link it to the democratic principles of representation and legitimacy. So the big question we are facing in a democratic system is that public affairs can't be managed collectively by everyone, so we need to somehow identify the right people, the right institutions to whom we delegate decision-making, who we entrust with making decisions on behalf of the public. And then the question comes up of legitimacy and what nurtures legitimacy. And then we're talking about input legitimacy and output legitimacy. I think we'll have a tendency of talking a lot about the input legitimacy, and that is designed differently in different democratic systems, and we have different experiences there, but ultimately it's about trusting processes. The PCS mentioned the electoral processes and the IEBC, so do you trust that the mechanisms at play are really working? Are the right people selected through the right processes? Are those who are entrusted playing according to the rules? Are the referees strong enough to make sure that they are playing according to the rules? That's when the regulators come in. The challenge around that is often to make people understand the processes. So I think where we have varying degrees across different political systems is the degree of transparency in those processes, the degree of citizens' understanding of the processes. Do they identify with the system? Do they really understand what is happening in that system? And how do we achieve that? So, I mean, the regulators, other public institutions can contribute to that by creating more transparency. But it's, I think, also the long-term task of making citizens understand that involves issues of civic education. That's really like a long-term ongoing process. I think nowadays also we have to increasingly talk about disinformation and so on. So how much is trust undermined by an understanding of the facts or by rather a misunderstanding or misrepresentation of facts? But I also think, and that's maybe where I can bring in the German experience, there's output legitimacy as well. And it's equally important. And we have to understand that ultimately also the different institutions are not just in charge of the processes. And the bureaucracy is not a purpose in itself. It serves the purpose of making sure that there's delivery, that there's output. And we've heard it before, citizens' expectations of seeing that there's an output, that they receive the services they want. Germany is a high-trust society. We have one of these nicely designed democratic systems that has matured over a few decades and so on, highly trusted public institutions. The processes are almost perfect, we thought. But trust is significantly declining in Germany, and that's not just because of disinformation and so on, but it's because of a lack of output legitimacy. We have the perfect processes and so on. Nobody questions in Germany the integrity of elections and that our bureaucratic systems are working reliably and so on. But they are super slow and they're becoming inefficient, and people don't have the feeling that the people they entrust with decision-making are making the right decisions and are addressing their problems and are addressing them effectively. So ultimately, when we talk about trust, it's also making sure that there's an output and that there is performance. I wasted a few hours last night watching the German national team play, and we have a trust deficit in our German national team. And we have erosion of trust in German football in general, because it's now an experience of 3 World Cups. And we can talk about the regulators. We can blame it on the VAR yesterday that disallowed a goal that was legitimate. But bottom line is, the feeling is, the performance was just not there. And the manager didn't entrust the right people with the mandate of performing on behalf of our nation. And when that happens, that also erodes trust. So we have to be aware of those 2 dimensions, trust in the processes, but also seeing the output, having the output legitimacy. And I want to lastly just link it to the global dimension, because one of the challenges for output legitimacy is that increasingly the challenges that we are dealing with, the challenges that our public institutions are dealing with, exceed the capacity of the nation state. So we have to reinvent crisis management, we have to reinvent problem solving, and we have to talk about the issue of trust and performance at the global level. So then what does that mean for transferring legitimacy, for delegating decision-making and problem solving to higher units that are even further removed from the people, and how do we make those processes transparent? How do we make people understand those processes and trust them, and also seeing the kind of results that we want to see? And right now, our multilateral institutions are struggling to produce the results. So we have the output legitimacy challenge at the national and the global level as well.
Thank you, Matthias. And we've looked at this conversation on a country level, on a Pan-African level, on a global level. But I just want to bring us back to a personal level. And Dr. Ogutu, I'll come to you now. The concept note for the summit references the argument that trust is a personal phenomenon that can only be restored by outstanding individuals. Do you agree, or is there a version of institutional trust that is designed to hold even when leadership fails?
That's actually a very hard question. There are people who would argue that if you have the systems in place, then it doesn't matter who's in charge, that you can trust the system, that if it's something that's existed for a long time, no matter who the one in charge is, the CEO, you can trust it to deliver, that the CEO can't just change the processes. But in most parts of the world, they look at the CEO. In fact, when they speak about what happened, they'll always say, Trump said this, Trump said that, or Ruto said this. I pity the leaders, because they're the ones everyone will either praise or blame, because they look at that person. And so trust is really, really vested in the persons in charge and their ability to inspire confidence. So it's tremendously important to get the leadership from the very top inspiring that confidence. And it'll come down to the same 3 things that I talked about. Do you mean well? Is this for you, or it's about us? Can we trust you to make a decision that's in favor of us, even if it's not serving your personal agenda? And then, are you competent? Are you actually capable of getting this thing done? And are you honest? So it's going to come down to that. And as leaders, and I know here there are very many leaders, you start with yourself. Do I trust my own organization? Would I consume my own product? Or having looked at what my people are doing, I wouldn't do it. I remember once being in the house of somebody who worked in the county council, and he was precisely an engineer in the water department. And then when the water was brought for us to drink, he asked, has this been boiled? And then I was thinking, wait a minute. What is this about? You can't drink your own water, because you're the city guy. You're the one who's providing us with the water. So after that, I used to drink from the tap. And I still do occasionally, but that really shook my confidence to see somebody not trusting his own product. So it's personal. You have to start with, would I consume my own product? I remember when Mishuki presided over the cleaning of the Nairobi River, and then he worked on it for months. Then there was this grand day when he was going to officially, I don't know, you can't inaugurate a river, but he was going to just inspect the work. And he said, I will drink the water from that river. And unless it was magic, sleight of hand, and they brought a clean glass of water, it looked real. They actually took the water from the river and gave it to him, and he drank it. And that was confidence in his own work. Like, I trust the process. I've worked with my people. I can consume my product. And then you can imagine the confidence that then inspires in other people. So it is very, very personal. And it starts at the top.
Wow, thank you so much for that challenge. It starts at the top, and I guess it starts in this very room we're in. Caroline, I'll come to you now on the issue of information. How do we navigate that tension between how much information is good information?
It's very interesting because if you look at the statistics that PS started with at the beginning to show the levels of trust, you see a decline. One of the numbers also that we would add there is that in the last 10 years also, the last decade, trust in parliament have also declined by a similar 10%. And yet, these are institutions that rely on access to information, ensuring that information is available to the public for people to make decisions. Whether you are a regulator, whether you're a civil society organization, or you're a media house, you rely on this information. And so the question is how, not just how much information is being availed out there, but what's the shape and format of that information? So for us in the civil society space, for example, it's asking ourselves the hard question: is the information available on time? So you have policies, you have legislation, you have strategic plans that you're issuing to the public. Do citizens know? It's not enough that it's on the website, for example. Can they access it? So is it accessible? But is it also usable? And so a lot of times then the investment is in ensuring that that information is shareable in chunks, that citizens can understand, your users can understand. A lot of the people in this room are probably generating very technical information based on the institutions that we lead. It could be numbers, it could be chemistry, it could be many things which a lot of the citizens then can't understand. So how do we simplify this information? And within the OGP space, we've been cognizant of this challenge, for example. And so one of the things that you'll see in the action plan that PS made reference to is the push to adopt plain language, so that citizens can understand what's available. Secondly, is to make sure that information is shared in a timely manner. Because what you've seen, and if you even go back to the trust deficit in 2024, it's not that participation was not there. It was. But was it sufficient time? Was the information availed in a manner that citizens could understand? Did they have sufficient time to interrogate the information and therefore make informed decisions? So it's ensuring that then this information can allow citizens to participate meaningfully, make informed decisions, and contribute to the ecosystem that relates to that information. And so if you do that, then the whole notion of information overload then becomes not so much of a challenge. But of course, there is the issue of the factual nature of the information. So is the information factual? And again, that feeds to the question of can citizens make informed decisions? So I think in a nutshell is to say that the information needs to be, usable, it needs to be accessible, it needs to be timely, it needs to allow for meaningful decisions, and it needs to allow citizens sufficient time to be able to interrogate sufficiently, to be able to make the decisions that they need to. Yeah.
Thanks, Caroline. Madalena, I'll come to you now. As development cooperation continues to evolve, what would you say are some approaches that have proven most effective in helping countries to build resilient institutions that deliver tangible results? And keeping in mind some of the words we've had this morning on honesty, trust, access to information. Madalena.
Thank you very much. I think the PCS and the PS also alluded to in the morning, in that the global affairs, we are all managed by what's called the rule-based system or international laws of governance, and that laws that are supposed to help us work efficiently together, respect each country's sovereignty, but also ensure that each country has an equal say and an equal share in governing of the regional or international cooperation. A lot has been said already, including by His Excellency, President Ruto, in terms of really advocating for a seat on the table for countries from the global south, whether this is in UN platforms, whether in UN security system, or whether in regional cooperation blocks. A lot have been said about the issue of imbalance in the global financial architecture and how there is unfairness in the lending that are allocated to countries from the global south, or the unfair rating of the risk of these countries. I think for a lot of changes or the reforms that are needed in this global cooperation, in either that ensuring that indeed countries are being assessed fairly through the same rules that have been established to govern the global ecosystem, and that countries are being given an opportunity to be heard, and countries are being recognized for what they bring to the table. When we look at issues, for example, challenges that face us all, whether it's climate change or issues of food security, we have seen that a number of countries, especially in the global south or in Africa or in Kenya, have the solutions that are needed to contribute to these global challenges. But because of lack of, respect, I can say, lack of valuing the contribution that each country brings to the table, it becomes difficult to have voices of, of all the countries, of all the contributors to the discourse to be heard, and that the solutions that they come with are also not taken on board. So really ensuring that the rules of the game are respected and that they're transacted or discharged equitably, ensuring that countries have a voice in issues or matters that concern them, ensuring that also that the dialogue are representative, that when countries come and engage in dialogue and contribute, that we hear, we listen to those voices, and that we also listen to the solutions that are contributed from different countries and different stakeholders. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Madalena. PS, I'll bring you back into the conversation. The upcoming summit is expected to produce a Nairobi statement on global trust. What would make that statement matter, not just as a document, but as a commitment? And what does accountability look like when governments are the signatories?
Well, thank you very much. I think two things. First, it is to appreciate again that underpinning all these norms is the understanding that mutual trust is the glue. It is the lubricant that oils interstate relations. It is what sustains governance amongst others. So that appreciating that there is a very solid principle of international law, which is, Pacta Sunt Servanda, which is about saying that all these countries that sign into treaties will implement it in good faith. But we are seeing a departure where treaties are signed. We have a charter of the UN that speaks about the need for consent before you go to war. Otherwise, it's a war of aggression. Okay. So countries are signing into instruments, but they're not, the good faith element is missing, and that is what breathes trust to the system. And so our view really is to reinvigorate the place of trust as a foundational doctrine that on which the superstructure of international norms actually sits. And therefore, we feel very strongly that, in a way, these will contribute to strengthening the rules-based order at a time when that order is
is really in peril. And yes, we will negotiate with states, but we will take this down, like we said, and that's why we're meeting regulators today. This is not a meeting necessarily of states. It's at the regulatory level, because this is also at the practical level. And by providing solutions that speak to their mandate, we believe very much that the granularity of the declaration will have everything for all the actors, and therefore it will be, I think, something that we can all implement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PS. Matthias, I'll come to you now. Some argue that trust in public institutions follow performance, and of course, based on your previous response, you did speak about the declining trust deficit in the the institutions in Germany, for instance. And I just want to get your thoughts on where values play, where identity comes in as far as how people trust the institutions, and at what point do they actually lose the trust that these institutions actually do represent them?
Well, ideally, we wouldn't even need the institutions to help us trust the individuals, because we would trust the individuals based on our value system. So it's a societal issue as well. In Germany, we talk about a high trust society. How did that come about? And why is it eroding right now? It's not because Germany are inherently more trustworthy. I think it's built over time. We had the luxury of decades of peace and prosperity, and then it's easy to develop a high trust society, and it's easy to maybe have the illusion that everything we do is based on shared values and so on, but maybe what was holding us together was more like, because it was fairly easy. So it's fairly easy to get along and to have that illusion that we are all equally trustworthy and so on, when it's not permanent crisis. Now we are in permanent crisis, and when it's in crisis, then it's really, really tested. Then our values are being tested. If we're all happy-go-lucky, then it's not so much put to the test, and then you kind of lose resilience. Kenya is a different story. I think to build trust in Kenya is a much harder task, because people carry more trauma, people carry more negative experiences, people carry more disappointment with them because you've gone through crisis. But I think that's also something that can be turned into an opportunity. Kenyans are way more resilient, and Kenyans, if you make a comparison between the surveys in Germany or Kenya, Kenyans are way more optimistic of the future. That is not changing with the Gen Z protests. The Gen Z is angry, and they have a certain degree of disillusionment, but they have not completely lost confidence in the future. And confidence in the future is a basis for trusting. And I think that's, as a societal issue, we can also bring that in. So let's not just delegate it to the perfect institutions, refereeing the perfect processes, but working on our values as a society, our identity as a society. Where do we stand? What makes a resilient society with confidence in the future, where we are able to trust each other? And that's why this conversation has to be so broad and involve all forms of media engagement and public engagement. That is really a societal discussion, not just a political one.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Matthias. I want to take a final round of questions, and then we will open it up to the floor. And if you do have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll have somebody bring you a microphone. And as we wait for one or two questions, I am not actually asking a question to the panel, but I would like you to address an issue that perhaps has not been raised yet, perhaps a challenge to the regulators and the leaders in the room. And perhaps, PS, as you think about this also, at the summit in October, what is Kenya bringing to the table, as a diplomatic leader in the global trust conversation? So as we, think about what can we take home from the different agencies that you represent this morning? Dr. Ogutu, we'll start with you, and then we can open it up to engagement.
Thank you, Terry. And I was actually wishing you had asked me the question that you asked Matthias just now,
please go
about
ahead.
values. Because now a value is a belief that is so deep that it controls the way you think, feel, and act. So when somebody has a certain value and you know it, you can count on them to act a particular way. And that now translates to trust, because you can take it to the bank. There's no way this person could have done that, because I know this person, their values, their family values, the way they were raised do not allow them to do that. And it can translate to regulators as well. So Matthias, you'll be happy to know that the example I give is from Germany. So I always say that if you get a certain machine that is really hopeless, it's bent, it's not working, even just the look of it, and then someone tells you, made in Germany, your first reaction will be, no way. And why is that your first reaction? Because you know that the German value of professionalism or excellence is such that no well-meaning German would allow such a product to leave their workshop. It would be like unthinkable. And you can take it to the bank. There's no way this was made in a factory in Germany. Now, how do you reach such a level of trust where you can trust an entire country and swear that this couldn't have left Germany? It's because they've built the processes, they've worked on the values. When you're growing up, you're told you can't do a shoddy job. Like, there's a certain level of shoddiness that will not be tolerated. And so with the regulators, that's the idea, just to build the trust to that level where we can just say, this would never happen in Kenya. And part of that is the conversations you have with the people down there. So I'm very happy to see my regulator, Prof. Mike Kuria here, Commission for University Education. So with his style, he actually calls us, he asks us, okay, what do you think? How do you think we could do things better? There's a lot of back and forth, and with that, you can actually build it. So I think the challenge to the regulators is, can you get us to such a level that someone in your industry where you're regulating sees something and says this was passed through your test, and someone can say, no way, no, I can't, I would never believe that. So that's the bar, if you can get it to that level.
Thank you, Dr. Hari. Ambassador Thigo?
Thanks, Terian. I just want to push the panel a little bit in terms of the thinking. One is that 72% of the world today is an autocracy. So that's the context, 72%. It means autocrats are delivering like democracies. So what does trust mean then in terms of a democratic framework? So is democracy still the fabric we need to push? And that speaks to your value system, Dr. Vince, you're talking about. The second thing I think is the assumption is trust is constant. I don't think it is. It depends on a crisis. It depends on instances. To your point, we don't trust you during the World Bank, but we trusted you during the Euros, and the coach is not being fired tomorrow, right? So I think it's to understand that trust is transit and depends on the moments. I think the third piece, which is where I bring my technology hat, is the rules of the previous revolution do not apply right now. I give you 3 instances: Tesla, SpaceX, Apple. To your point, you're saying the leaders trust institutions. They were not nice people, and they're not nice people, but you trust the car, the Tesla. Everybody has an iPhone, if I'm not wrong. And so I think for me, that's my point, that we need to start to think about how trust applies in this era of technology. And last, I think for me, then, do we need to redefine trust? Or do we need to reimagine it based on potentially new values, even as the world is being reorganized? And that's where I see the opportunity for Kenya, because then potentially we'll bring something new, because the rules have just changed. So how do we look at trust within this new rules-based system? Thank you.
But it's a very interesting and timely question, because again, you look at the last decade and you look at the trust deficit, and it correlates with the trust, with the democracy decline across the world. And again, you go a step further and you see that democracy decline across the world then gives us a different sort of leadership, whether you're looking at the West or even in the continent itself. And then it tells you how even young people are looking at their political space. Who are they trusting more? the data that we saw, some of the data will even show you that young people have more trust in the military, for example. And you can see how that is playing out in West Africa. And so for me, the trust question then relates to what Matthias was saying, because if you then use the Germany example, you see systems that work. You see service delivery that is working for the people. And I do think that if you respond, if you respond to the needs of the citizens, if they know they can trust your products, if they know they can trust your services, if they know you are going to do what you said you will, then you see trust levels going up. But to your question, Balozi, then this democracy and the trust, it can't just be terms that we use. It has to mean something to the citizens. And I think that's been the bigger question on democracy. Is democracy working for the people? Who is defining this democracy? So when we say, with the people, for the people, by the people, are we really living up to those norms? When we say we are leaving no one behind, are we really inclusive? Are we ensuring that even the spaces, for example, within OGP that we say we are co-creating, are we broadening the base to make sure that everybody is in the room? And so for us and for this space is to ask ourselves the hard questions that one, who is in the room? Are we speaking to them or are we speaking over them? Are we ensuring that the definitions of trust, democracy, and all the other OGP and everything else that we are talking about is really addressing the needs of the citizens at the basic level? Because only when they begin to see this change do they also then begin to trust that we mean well. And it ties into then the question I raised about, is it meaningful? So are their voices being heard and therefore informing the decisions that are being made? And then lastly, if Afrobarometer, in their research, you see that the democracy decline has been informed largely, especially in the continent, by the fact that citizens don't feel that democracy is really working for them. They don't see that shift very fast as they would want it to see. And that gives rise to the 72% of autocratic spaces, because then the same transparent, accountable systems that we have trusted are the ones that are giving us those autocratic systems, because the elections are free, they are fair, they are transparent, but the belief system that's driving the people that are then running for office gives us a different set of leadership that is not aligned to the democratic principles that we have become accustomed to. And I don't need to give examples of countries that have been bastions of democracy in the past and now are the ones that are undermining the very principles, including OGP principles, and withdrawing from the OGP principles, and yet they're the countries that set it up. So to then say that these systems also, it's not enough to build them. You have to work hard to make sure that they continue to work, that they show value for the people, that they respond to people's needs. Otherwise, you can see how within a decade, it has flipped. And if you go back, all this has, whether it's a pandemic, the COVID pandemic that eroded trust in institutions, whether it's the electoral systems, within a decade, we flipped the coin. And so the hard work now needs to begin. And this Trust Summit must be one of those platforms that we then create to start changing the conversation and showing that actually we can walk the talk and make democracy meaningful, participation meaningful, innovation meaningful, technology responsive to the citizens' needs, and thus begin to rebuild the trust. Because I think the question is rebuilding, because it was there, it's been eroded, and now we seek to rebuild it. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Before we take the next, rebuilding trust or building trust in a changing or a dynamic global space, in the context of Kenya, as we speak today about building trust, does that also change in how we build trust compared to how trust was built in the past?
Ambassador Figo has asked about whether we need to redefine trust. I'm not really sure that we need to. I think what we are trying to do is actually to spotlight on it and to transform it from being just a principle to think in terms of making it operational.
practical, tangible. What is the trust infrastructure within the country, within organizations? How can we improve that? How can we measure that? To address also the issue of transient, how do you measure that over time? And that's why we're thinking that we should introduce the idea of, a trust barometer, an annual trust barometer, for example, as one of the tools that can look at our institutions and signal that this particular institution is performing very well across these parameters, these objective, verifiable standards, that we've all agreed upon. And so from where I sit, I don't think we need to we need to do anything fundamentally different, but I think we really need to focus on this as architecture, as trust infrastructure, as something that we can operationalize to help us navigate some of the challenges that we face as a globe as well.
Thank you, PS. We'll take the next question. Please introduce yourself and who you'd like to address it to.
Thank you so much, PS, and the panelists who have really brought some insights into the discussion. And I think just for a start, for me, trust is one of those variables that have been researched on by many researchers in different fields over time and time again. And so it shows us the importance of trust as a variable that needs to really be built on. I had first, my question was on the panelists, but I think maybe just to add on to what Ambassador Thiko said, it was on in this era of misinformation and disinformation, how do we build trust? How do we use information technology to build trust, as opposed to maybe, making it to be the cause of mistrust, across the society. The second one is especially just that's to us as a country, and especially given what we've been able to achieve over time. When you look at the financial sector, we are a financial hub in the region. We are an innovation hub. How do we then utilize these achievements to build trust to the institutions that we have? And I want to give the example of the banking industry. You realize that, most of our banks in Kenya, they've built their capabilities, they've built trusts over time. That's why they have subsidiaries in the region. Secondly, when you look at in the last even 1 year, you realize that we have many foreign banks who've actually been coming to invest in Kenya because they believe in our banking industry. So how do we then, as a country, and as we continue with the conversation towards the summit, how do we anchor our conversations, our engagement on the strong foundations which we have built over time, so that then Kenyans can continue also to trust our own institutions? Thank you.
I think you can't change the elements of trust. It's something probably deeply coded in humanity from like centuries and millennia. This is how we build trust. What you can change is the particular way in which you signal that you're trustworthy. So in the age of disinformation, AI, fake news, and all of that, you can no longer trust something because you saw a video and therefore it has to be true. which maybe 20 years ago, you'd more or less trust that if you see the video, that's the evidence and it's true. But in this day and age, you can no longer use that to build or destroy trust. So you have to kind of then take everything with a pinch of salt. Everyone has to become a researcher. So meaning you don't just take the first data that you see. You have to triangulate who else is talking about it, which kind of sources are talking about it, how much due diligence has been done by those sources. Let me actually wait a few hours before I jump to conclusions, suspend judgment, and in 1 or 2 days' time, the truth might come out. So what's changed is how you, what you look at in order to build the trust. But the elements of trust will stay the same. Are those people competent? Are they honest? Do they mean well? Those are going to stay forever. It's just how exactly you go about. Now, about the issue of falling down, picking yourself up and brushing yourself, how fast can you do it? So in some cases where you are competent, you mean well, it was just an accident, which can happen to anyone, then in that case, I think transparency is what you need to do to rebuild trust. You don't sugarcoat it, you don't cover up, you just come and say we are, and also you apologize. We're very, very sorry for what happened. This is not how we normally operate. As you can see, we try our best to do this and that. This is what happened. This is what we've done so far to try and mitigate. This is what we promised to do in order to pay for that mistake. So take the consequences of your actions. So admit the mistake, take the consequences, be transparent. That'll help you to brush up very quickly. And if you have a track record, people will be kind. They'll actually respond to that. Now, if you violated the trust because you really weren't good enough, there's something you were negligent on, then the honorable thing to do is to resign. And that resignation will build trust for the organization because it shows that you, remember the thing of meaning well, I'm more interested in you getting the right thing than even in my own personal career and position and all of that. I'm ready to give it up so that you get the best deal. That again builds trust, both for the organization and for yourself, because it shows you're the kind of person who wouldn't hang on to something for personal gain above what other people are getting. So there are situations where you do have to resign, but if it was an accident, it was a mistake, just own it up, apologize, offer to pay for it, take the consequences, and be as transparent as you can be.
Right. Thank you, VC. We've got some questions at the back.
My name is Linda Musumba, and I'm here with my colleagues Alex and Duncan. Just to say that we're very excited about the Global Summit, for which you will be hosting in Nairobi. I think one of the things that the Chief of Staff and Head of the Public Service has been trying to do with regulators is to be able to grow a community of practice. One of the things that he's been wanting to do is to, of course, raise the capacity of regulators who, since this administration came on, have made a great effort to collectivize the regulators in this country. I believe those who are in this room will attest to the fact that at least they do now meet together and have sessions and even annual conferences to that effect. So one of the things that, of course, has been outstanding is the element of capacity building of regulators. And as you've said, PS, that in the march towards the Global Summit in October, there'll be sessions that there'll be I think you called them pre-summit sessions involving the regulators. And that presents a great opportunity for them to be able to have their capacity built even as they engage with their counterparts in the region and around the world. So we look forward from the Office of the Chief of Staff and Head of the Public Service to just witness this great opportunity and moment as you lead in being able to raise the capacity of regulators in our country to enhance their ability to raise the confidence and trust of the public in this country and, of course, regionally and worldwide. To be able to serve the public in the best way possible. Thank you.
Thank you, PS. My name is John Walubengo, Deputy Data Commissioner. I'm representing Madam Kasait, who couldn't make it. I have a question for PS. And before I shoot the question, I just want to give some background. Kenya has been involved with the European Union, and Ambassador here knows on the question of the data adequacy, and we are coming to the tail end of it. The issue of data adequacy, in simple terms, means that the European Union data commissioners will reach at a point where they have trust that the Kenyan data protection regulatory framework is equivalent to EU standards. We are very confident that we shall be able to attain that in due course, but the question is, it looks like the European Union has more trust in the Kenyan data regulator than the Kenyans themselves. So we want to understand why the gap and what can we do about it. Thank you.
Indeed, I'm very pleased that the EU is in the process of recognizing our data adequacy, which is important. The reason for this, as you know, is because we have been pushing hard to get some investment in data centers and in the tech sector, from the EU. But to do that, they need to satisfy themselves that our systems here in terms of data protection are as credible as their own systems. And I think because of the political engagement we've had, because of their own assessments, they've come to the place where they believe that we are actually pretty close. But having said that, then there still remains a gap between their appreciation and the appreciation on the part of Kenyans of your own capability. So the question then is it an issue of information? Okay? Or is it an issue of belief despite information? Okay? Is it an issue of engagement? Maybe there is an engagement gap. Okay? So, and then of course, that engagement has to be at the places where you can actually engage with these Kenyans. You might need to think about, segmenting, the different actors, and developing an engagement strategy. And I think there are many in this room who are happy to work with you on an engagement strategy to be able to break it down for our citizens. And I believe very much that the weight of of what you will provide, what you will put on the table, will persuade them, because it's, Kenya is a deliberative democracy. Yes, people may get caught up in fake news, people may get caught up in disinformation, but as you continue to engage, there is a threshold beyond which, even the naysayers, will be able to acquiesce in the fact that I think you're saying the truth, or you're presenting fact. And you see the president doing that to a level where even those who had certain questions about what government intention was are beginning to come around and say, look, the president is delivering, despite everything else. So I think there are possibilities, and we're happy to work with you. To Linda's point, the summit certainly will give a huge opportunity for our regulators. I did indicate that we will dedicate a whole day just for regulators to engage with citizens. And we want to work together, like I said, on the indicators around this trust barometer for regulators. We hope we can be able to launch the barometer itself during the summit. And again, I think that will provide even more clarity, with respect to how you want to engage with citizens going into the future. Lastly, to the point that my brother from the Capital Markets Authority raised, on the issue of dusting up, again, I know it's been answered, but I feel like we need to look at your grievance mechanisms, and really begin to think about a graduated grievance mechanism that has a loop back, to give space for those who could have inadvertently, fallen afoul of the system, to find their way back. So I think depending on the gravity, of what somebody could have done. I think there are ways in which a grievance mechanism could be restorative rather than punitive, so that again we don't lose too many people. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, PS. Daniel? And just before Daniel, no, you can go ahead, but I just want to loop in Ambassador Thigo. Dr. Susan asked a question about technology in the context of trust. In the age of misinformation and disinformation, how do we still use the same technology to build trust? So Daniel will come up and then you can respond to that. Daniel.
Thank you. I think mine is a statement. I think we're also being a little bit too harsh on ourselves. But that is our spirit. We are our biggest critic. But as we travel around the world preaching the Kenya message, especially even Doc knows, Thigo knows, Susan knows, that people want to listen to Kenya. People, and by listening, it is a journey to trust, to believe. It's not all doom and gloom, especially with a bias to financial services sector and tech sector. Kenya has done a whole load of work in ensuring that these systems work. Between 2010 and 2020, Kenya spent so much time in building institutions. That's why today, even early in the morning, you heard that our central bank, our CMA, our insurance regulators, our capital markets authority, these are strong institutions which spend time to build these institutions. So I think, and with that, now we are seeing a lot of capital now deciding to come to the continent, and to come to the continent through Nairobi. We're seeing venture capital, but we're seeing private equity coming into the country. And as you know, global capital follows trust. So I think what we need to do, in addition to this trust discussion, I think along with that, we just need to also discuss the issue of predictability. Are we predictable enough? I think the trust thing is getting there. And if we compare ourselves to the continent, but I remember our president always tells us, don't compare yourselves with your neighbors, compare yourselves with the highest degree. So from a continent perspective, I think we're doing very well. From a global perspective, we need to do a little bit much more, but what is working for us? Even though you're comparing with the A student globally, but what can work for us? So legislation is very, very important. Sometimes it's our biggest problem. If we put up our hands and say, who are the lawyers in the room? They'll be the majority, because we're very good in writing policies and writing good documents. However, that can also be a challenge for us, because now investors are saying, yes, everything you talk about, Daniel, is good, but how predictable are we? So as we go into these pre-summit discussions and also into the summit, let's discuss about how we can tie in long-term predictable legislation together with this trust thing that I think we're doing very well at. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
And I'm Daniel Minder, CEO of Nairobi International Financial Center. Thank you.
So a couple of things, DG. A couple of things. One, I think, is to understand that we live in an era of technology acceleration. And that's why, for me, we are now talking about technology in this very enhanced way. Also to understand that this changed in the last 3-4 years. It's simply because of generative artificial intelligence and how technology changes. So my first response is how? Is Caro actually alluded to it? I think transparency. Because a lot of these technologies are built and are concentrated amongst a few countries and a few companies. What we're asking for, even as for Kenya, is how do we open up that space so that we can co-create and understand how the technology thinks. Right now, we don't. But let me add another point. What you miss there as data is that actually people trust more teachers, which is interesting, and the technology. So even the technology that is spewing misinformation, disinformation, is the most trusted. Not the content, the technology. And that speaks to the democratization of the tech. So I think if we can pull out those key elements, ensuring that that space remains open, but also ensuring that we engage in that space, I think to your point, because again, demography, we are a younger population. They engage between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. Are we engaging at that particular time? So and that's why I kept on saying, how do we change our behavior based on these new spaces so that we can begin to meet people where they are so that there are no conversational asymmetries, and hopefully the summit will create that convergence.
All right. Thank you so much, Ambassador Thigo. So we are coming to the end of our conversation. I'll take some final thoughts from our panelists before I hand it over to Dr. Ismail, who will give us a quick summary of the day, and then we will call it a day. So some final thoughts?
My final thoughts will be on what Daniel said about consistency. So we can count on you to deliver. You're predictable because you're consistent. So please look up the Six Sigma. I know a lot of you are in industry and manufacturing, so you're familiar with the Six Sigma concept. So if it was 1 Sigma, it would be 3.4 out of 10 are defective. The rest are okay. Then if it's 2 Sigma, it would be 3.4 out of 100. So how much chaos can you tolerate? If it's fruits, 3 out of 10, would you still buy from the same vendor? But if it's 3 out of 100, you'd say, I'll buy. If 3 are rotten and 96 are okay, I think I'd go to that vendor. But then there are certain kinds of things where even 3 out of 1,000, 3 Sigma don't work. You go to 6 Sigma, like if 3 out of 1,000 planes crash, I'm not boarding any plane. Not even 3 out of 10,000. Not even 3 out of 100,000. So just ask yourself, how good do I want to be as a regulator? And what systems do I have to guarantee a certain level of trust? And it's beautiful because you have at least those 6 Sigmas to work with. So ask yourself honestly, would I pass the 1 Sigma test? Would I pass the 2 Sigma test? So just how good are you? And of course, when you reach a certain level, people can't imagine anything bad could have happened from you because your Sigmas are just so many. So please look it up, and that's my parting shot.
Thank you, VC. Caroline?
Thank you, Terianne. I want to close it on 2 points. I'm sure all of us are on WhatsApp. And once in a while, you get a message, from a number that you're familiar with. The face is familiar. But the text, you read the text and it tells you, this is not the way Terianne texts. This is not the sort of message that Terianne would send to me or anyone else in the room. And why does that come to mind? It's because you trust the person. You trust the sort of information the person would send to you, the sort of request they would make to you. And you're like, no, either I call her, and more often than not, when that comes to mind, you'll actually get either another message or a call, or if you're in a group, you'll see a message pop up in that group that so-and-so's phone has been hacked. But your lack of either sending money or responding to that question was based on the credibility of that person, that you know that person. And I think for us and our regulators, and to the question about misinformation and disinformation, I think at the heart of it is credibility. Do we trust an organization well enough to know that if we see a message that is fake, we know that, no, this institution cannot send out such a message. This media house cannot publish such news. It's because you've built credibility and we can trust. So at the core of it is the credibility, that the trust will also not come if the base, the credibility, the integrity of the institutions and the individuals is not built. And then lastly, I think to add to what Daniel has said, I think Kenya is an embodiment of resilience. And in so many times, our lowest moments have also been the moments that we have built back better. And, this is what the summit, it also offers us that opportunity to say that, yes, trust was broken at some point, but we've learned. And, and so how do we rebuild better than where we were? How do we build back better? And I think the summit, the platforms that we are running, including OGP itself, gives us this moment. Our constitution was built on the backbone of a very dark moment for this country. And the constitution itself does mirror a lot of the values and the ethos and the integrity that we are discussing here. And so I believe that just as we have and continue to, even this is a moment to then set the goal higher than we have, and to then echo what is, what's the best global practice, but unlike the past where we have relied on the like maybe on the West, we are saying, why can't we have an African-led moment that then resets even the democratic questions, the trust deficit in the world, and reignites the conversations between the governed and those that are governing the people. And lastly, to the data office, I think communication and public outreach, really, this is it. Trust is also built on communication. And so if you don't communicate with people, they will not trust your information. And so just I conclude by saying that we're in a good moment. Let's build on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Madeline?
As Caroline has said, Kenya is governed by a constitution and policies for these different institutions that are entrusted to provide services to citizens. I think if we all, as institutions or as citizens, can abide and consistently apply those policies or the constitution for which the country is premised on, that's one indicator of creating trust in the citizens. It has been said also, to confirm what a colleague has just mentioned, consistency in delivering the results that those institutions are trusted to deliver, irrespective of who is at the helm of that institution. And in fact, that's one of the measure or indicators of strong institutions. Institutions are not strong because of who is holding it at a particular point in time, but that they in itself can consistently deliver and perform at a regular basis, at a consistent basis, and this one then create trust for the citizens or people who benefit from it. Last but not the least is that the systems of checks and balances are indeed functioning, because indeed there are situations of whether it's an individual, whether it's an institution has fallen or has defaulted or did not perform according to par, but are the systems of checks and balances functional? Are they able to address those gaps to be able to recreate or to be able to rebuild the trust in those institutions? So thank you very much.
I hope that this conversation this morning has helped spotlight the fact that regulators are at the vanguard of enabling trust in government. If there's one message that you need to go to your offices with, it is the realization that you're an enabler of many things, but I think the most critical of which is trust. Is trust. You're enabling trust in government. Every service that you deliver, every due diligence exercise that you engage in, is a statement of trust towards government. Second, of course, for me is that the issue of credible commitment. So the president made this commitment to host the summit, on 11th September 2024. We are asking you to support us, to work with us, so that this commitment becomes credible. Every commitment the president makes is a commitment that needs to be credible. By working with us to deliver this summit, you are supporting that imperative, and that profile of the president. And lastly, I did hear Daniel say that we are being hard on ourselves. That is probably true. And the issue of predictability that you raise is actually one of the indicators, I think, that we need to build into this trust barometer, because people need to know ex ante that if they come to you, this is how you will process their issue. And so it generates predictability, which then leads to trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you, PS. Matthias?
It's quite tough speaking at the end in a panel like this, being aware of a certain trust deficit on my side for two reasons. I don't even have a PhD, and I know people tend to trust someone with a doctor or a professor title more. But also, I'm the foreigner in this panel. So I know there'll be some mistrust towards me, because some people might think, what's the foreigner doing there? This German foundation, they must be having some kind of different agenda. Well, my brother Korea knows we are together. This is a genuine collaboration based on shared values and so on. So just to address my own trust deficit. But the point I wanted to make is it was emphasized a few times, the linkage between trust in individuals and trust in institutions. And how do we deal with breaches of trust by individuals, and how do the institutions respond to that? How does the public respond to that? Because I see two challenges there. One, do we see that institutions deal with breaches of trust from within, or are, as we just heard, are the checks and balances working? Does a breach of trust have consequences? And is there transparency around it? And do the people see that an institution can restore trust by acting against those who act against it? There's also another dimension to it. That's how we deal with it in civil society or in the media. How do we report about breaches of trust? And how do we sometimes tend to make very generalized statements that also contribute to eroding trust? And then you'll find those statements like, oh, the political class is like this, the government is like this institution is corrupt, and we are not differentiating well. And I think that's something that we also have to contribute in this discourse and at the Global Trust Summit, to have this differentiated picture, to have a conversation that's based on facts and based on a willingness to understand the complexities and not come with a simple narrative. And we will invite those who have a closed narrative. We will invite those who come with the conviction that, what is the summit even about? Is the Kenyan government hosting it? What am I going to get out of that? Let them come and see that this is not a rhetorical exercise, that is not some publicity stunt, but it's a genuine effort driven by shared values and a genuine commitment of making institutions work better and perform better for the people. So everybody should come and see that we are genuine at the Global Trust Summit, and I'm sure we'll send that message quite effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthias. Let's give a warm round of applause.